Sign over the $150,000 trust fund for your sister's wedding right now, or we will sue you. Stop crying and ruining the vibe. My mother's voice cut through the phone, sharp and utterly heartless. I sat in my empty house in Austin, Texas, still wearing my dirt-stained black dress from burying my 10-year-old son completely alone yesterday. While I was lowering his casket into the cold earth, they were drinking champagne across town. I closed my eyes, took a long, slow breath and whispered, "I understand." They had no idea they had just sealed their own destruction. Thank you for watching video. Before I take you back there, do me one small favor. Take a second to like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. It helps more than you know. My name is Corinne and I am 36 years old. I work as a middle school science teacher, a job that requires endless patience and a firm grasp on the laws of cause and effect. In my family, however, my role was entirely different. I was the invisible scapegoat, the quiet disappointment whose only purpose was to stand in the shadows so the golden child, my younger sister Tamsin, could shine. For my entire life, my parents, Lenora and Vance, had treated my sister like absolute royalty. They built a towering empire of favoritism, and I was just the dirt beneath the foundation. But nothing prepared me for the staggering betrayal they would unleash when my world completely fell apart. 3 years ago, my brilliant, brave little boy Jude was diagnosed with osteosarcoma, a rare and aggressive bone cancer. Jude was my entire universe. He loved the stars, dreamed of being an astronaut, and possessed a quiet courage that made the rest of the world look incredibly small. When the diagnosis first hit, my family performed their required roles perfectly. My father, Vance, who ran a highly successful luxury real estate brokerage, threw money at expensive fruit baskets. My mother, Lenora, a prominent socialite and head of the local arts council, made sure to post frequent, tearful updates on her social media pages to gather sympathy from her wealthy friends. Tamsin would occasionally visit, complaining about the hospital coffee while taking selfies with her sick nephew. But as the months dragged on, and the reality of Jude's illness became a grim daily battle, their mask slowly began to slip. Cancer is profoundly inconvenient for people who only care about aesthetics. The hospital visits slowed down, then stopped entirely. Vance claimed he was far too busy closing million-dollar property deals. Lenora suddenly had endless charity galas and garden tours that simply could not be missed. Tamsin had just gotten engaged to Alden, a wealthy tech developer, and her upcoming wedding became the absolute center of the universe. While I was sleeping in a rigid hospital chair, holding a vomit basin for my son in the middle of the night, my family was touring 5-star catering venues. The breaking point, the moment my heart turned completely to ice, happened 1 month before Jude passed away. His treatment had failed. The doctors told me we were completely out of options. Jude was in immense pain, and one afternoon, he looked up at me with his hollow, tired eyes and asked if his grandparents were coming to say goodbye. I walked out to the hallway, my hands shaking, and dialed my mother's number. She answered over the sound of clinking glasses and upbeat music. I begged her to come to the hospital. I told her the end was near. Lenora sighed, a sound of sheer annoyance, and said, "The hospital is just too depressing, Corinne. We need to focus on happy things right now, like the wedding. We are at the bridal boutique, and Tamsin is having a meltdown over the lace on her veil. We will try to stop by next week." She hung up. I stood in that sterile white hallway, completely frozen. I realized then that I did not have a family. I had a group of predators who only saw my son's tragedy as a dark cloud ruining their perfect, sunny parade. People who cannot sit with you in the dark do not deserve to stand with you in the light. There was something else they were incredibly focused on, something they never failed to mention. When my late husband, Declan, passed away unexpectedly 5 years prior, his life insurance policy left a $150,000 trust fund specifically designated for Jude's future. It was meant for his college, for his life. With Jude's terminal diagnosis, my parents knew that legally, as his sole surviving parent, that money would soon fall under my control. They circled me like vultures, dropping constant, heavy hints about how a lavish wedding would bring much-needed joy to our grieving family. They thought I was weak. They thought I was distracted by my grief. But the snare was already set, and they were walking blindly into a trap of their own making. When the doctors told me Jude only had a few days left, I made a quiet, definitive phone call. I sat down with the estate attorney managing the account. I did not hesitate. I transferred every single penny of that $150,000 to the Pediatric Bone Cancer Foundation, establishing a research grant in Jude's name. I signed the paperwork, watched the ink dry, and locked the vault forever. 2 weeks later, my beautiful boy took his last breath in my arms. He was 10 years old. The funeral was held on a Tuesday, under a gray weeping sky. I stood by his grave completely alone. My parents and my sister did not show up. They claimed they had a non-refundable deposit on a luxury engagement yacht party on Lake Travis, and Tamsin simply could not reschedule. While I shoveled dirt onto my child's coffin with my own bare hands, my sister was posting pictures of champagne flutes and sunset kisses on Instagram. The very next morning the phone rang. It was Lenora, delivering the utterly heartless threat about suing me if I did not sign over the trust fund. I absorbed her venom, whispered my compliance, and prepared for the dinner party she demanded I attend that evening to finalize the paperwork. I drove to Vance's sprawling, gated mansion in the wealthy hills of Austin. The house was bathed in golden light, radiating an aggressive, sickening warmth. I walked through the massive oak doors wearing the same black dress from the funeral, my face completely devoid of makeup, my expression a wall of solid ice. They were gathered in the formal dining room. The crystal chandelier sparkled. The smell of roasted lamb and expensive wine filled the air. It was a royal court, and Tamsin, the golden child, was holding court at the center. "Corinne, darling, sit down," Vance commanded, pouring himself a generous glass of Cabernet. He did not ask how I was doing. He did not offer condolences. "We want to keep this brief and positive," Lenora said, adjusting her pearl necklace. "We know you are sad, but Jude would want his money to bring happiness to this family. Tamsin has found the absolute perfect band, but they require a massive upfront fee. You will write the check tonight." Tamsin leaned forward, swirling her wine. "I even talked to the wedding planner. We are going to put a tasteful little framed photo of Jude right next to the champagne tower. It will be so touching. Everyone will cry." My blood ran completely cold. A photo by the champagne tower. A prop for her vanity. They thought I was cornered. They thought I was the prey. I looked at the three of them, their faces glowing with sheer greed, and I felt a profound, absolute calm wash over me. I reached into my purse, but I did not pull out a checkbook. I pulled out a single sheet of paper, folded perfectly in thirds, and placed it on the mahogany table. "You are a little late," I said, my voice dropping to a winter chill. "The trust is gone." The room went absolutely silent. The clinking of silverware stopped. Vance lowered his wine glass, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean gone? It is a $150,000 account. Do not play games with me, Corinne. I have the best attorneys in the state on retainer." "It is not a game, Dad," I replied, leaning back in my chair. The mask was slipping off their faces, revealing the panicked monsters beneath. Before Jude died, I acted as the sole legal beneficiary and executor. I initiated an irrevocable charitable transfer. The funds have been completely dispersed to a federal pediatric cancer research trust. The account is liquidated. Closed. It is a binding contract. There is not a single penny left for your caterer, your band, or your pathetic champagne tower. Lenora's face drained of color. She looked as though she had been struck by lightning. Tamsin let out a piercing, hysterical shriek, slamming her fists onto the table, shattering a crystal water glass. "That was my money," Tamsin screamed, her face contorting into an ugly, furious mask. "You ruined my wedding. You selfish, miserable witch, you ruined my life." Vance sprang to his feet, his face flushed purple with staggering rage. "I will absolutely destroy you in court. I will file an injunction for estate fraud. You had no legal right to authorize that wire transfer without family consent." I stood up, moving with a deliberate, haunting slowness. I reached into my pocket and tossed a crumpled photograph onto the table, right on top of the legal receipt. It was a printed screenshot of Tamsin's Instagram post from the yacht, time-stamped at the exact moment I was lowering my son into the earth. "Take me to court," I whispered, staring dead into Vance's eyes. Let us stand before a federal judge and enter this into the public record. Let the entire city of Austin see what the prominent Vance family was doing while their grandson was being buried. Call your attorneys. I dare you. I turned my back on them and walked out the front door. Behind me, the towering empire of their family facade completely crumbled into dust, swallowed by the sounds of Tamsin's shrieks and Vance's roaring threats. The next few days were a masterclass in sheer desperation. Vance actually tried to have a cease and desist order delivered to my house, claiming I was mentally incompetent. But he had not anticipated the arrival of my Aunt Nadine. Nadine was Vance's older sister, a retired military trauma nurse from Seattle, and the only person in our bloodline with a spine. She was the only one who had regularly called Jude via video chat to read him stories. Nadine flew into Texas the moment she heard what happened. When Vance's ridiculous legal courier showed up at my door, Nadine took the envelope, laughed loudly, and tore the documents into tiny shreds right on the front porch. She looked at the courier and said, "Tell my brother that filing frivolous legal claims against a grieving mother is a fantastic way to get investigated for financial malpractice." Nadine sat with me in my kitchen and revealed the staggering truth. Vance was severely over-leveraged in his real estate business. His luxury firm was on the brink of catastrophic financial ruin. He desperately needed that trust fund money to pay for Tamsin's extravagant wedding because the groom's family, the wealthy developers, were threatening to pull their business partnerships if the wedding was not an absolute society spectacle. My father was not just greedy. He was completely broke and drowning in debt. But a cornered predator is the most dangerous. When their legal threats failed, Lenora and Tamsin did the unthinkable. The director of the Pediatric Bone Cancer Foundation called me on a Tuesday morning, sounding incredibly distressed. She informed me that two women claiming to be my mother and sister were aggressively harassing their corporate office. Lenora had been screaming at the charity workers over the phone, claiming I was a psychiatric patient who had stolen family emergency funds, demanding they reverse the charitable trust immediately. They were threatening to launch a social media smear campaign against the Cancer Foundation. They were willing to attack a charity saving dying children, just to get their hands on a wedding deposit. That was the moment I stopped defending myself and went on the absolute offensive. I did not call my parents to argue. I called the investigative journalism department at the most prominent local news station in Austin. I sat down for an exclusive on-camera interview. I handed the reporter the irrevocable trust documents. I handed them the vicious voicemails my mother had left me. And I handed them the time-stamped photographs of my family drinking champagne while I stood alone in the rain at a cemetery. The story aired during the primetime evening broadcast. It was a masterpiece of total devastation. The reporter did not hold back. The segment detailed how a local prominent real estate family abandoned their dying 10-year-old grandson, skipped his funeral for a yacht party, and then systematically harassed a children's cancer charity attempting to claw back a legally binding donation to fund a lavish wedding. They showed the redacted legal documents. They played a snippet of Lenora's demanding voicemail. The fallout was absolute and immediate. By the next morning, the societal execution of my family was complete. The wealthy elite of Austin, the people Lenora had spent decades trying to impress, completely turned their backs on her. She was quietly expelled from the Arts Council. Vance's real estate firm was flooded with calls from clients terminating their exclusive contracts. Nobody wanted their multi-million-dollar homes, represented by a man who harassed cancer charities. But the most staggering blow landed squarely on the golden child. Alden, Tamsin's wealthy fiancé, saw the broadcast from his office. The sheer embarrassment and cruelty were too much for his family's public relations team to handle. Alden's parents demanded he sever ties immediately. He packed his bags, called off the wedding, and moved out of their shared penthouse, leaving Tamsin entirely responsible for a $30,000 non-refundable catering penalty. Tamsin actually drove to my house that night, banging on my front door, screaming hysterically on my porch. She demanded I call the news station and retract the story. She wailed that I had utterly ruined her perfect life. I did not open the door. I simply picked up my phone, dialed the local police precinct, and had officers escort her off my property for criminal trespassing. As they put her in the back of the cruiser, I stood on my porch, completely unfazed. "You ruined my life," she sobbed through the police car window. "No, Tamsin," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the cool night air. "Your champagne ruined your life. I just provided the receipt." 1 year later, the air in my life is incredibly clear. I am sitting on the back porch of my new quiet home, watching the stars begin to pinpoint the evening sky. I heard through Aunt Nadine that Vance had to file for corporate bankruptcy. He and Lenora were forced to sell the luxury mansion and downsize to a small, cramped apartment on the outskirts of the city. Tamsin is still single, deeply in debt, and working a miserable retail job she absolutely loathes. They are trapped in a prison of their own design, completely isolated from the world they once ruled. Yesterday, I received a beautifully framed letter from the Pediatric Bone Cancer Foundation. The funds from Jude's trust were combined with an anonymous donor match, and they have officially opened a new wing. It is called the Jude Space and Science Lab, a specialized playroom and learning center for children undergoing intensive chemotherapy. My son's legacy is bringing light to the darkest corners of other children's lives. I lost my family, but I gained my absolute freedom. I learned that you cannot heal in the same environment that broke you, and sometimes the only way to win a rigged game is to flip the entire board upside down. I have peace in my heart that no amount of their money or status could ever buy. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. It was hard to share, but I hope it reminds someone out there that setting boundaries with toxic family is not selfish. It's survival. Tell me in the comments, how would you have handled that dinner? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories. Take care of yourselves.